Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about Thanksgiving. Now, I think we're all familiar now with the constant, incessant, non-stop campaign by the globalist cabal to crush, to demoralize Western societies. So anything that is revered or considered important or is a time-honored tradition of white society must be attacked and destroyed. And this is part of the demoralization campaign. And of course, the globalists have infiltrated and taken over our political class, our education institutions, our public services, our think tanks, so that not a single voice is raised in opposition to this demoralization campaign, which again is non-stop. There is nothing that we hold dear or value that is not being attacked at all sides with the most outrageous and hysterical lies, constant lies. But because they own the entire media landscape, they can get away with telling these lies, and there just isn't enough of a public voice in the public square to fight back or even question it or counterattack or anything like that. So that they are getting away with it, not because they're right or it's true or it's real or anything. It's all made up. It's all invented lies, but they can get away with it because they control pretty much the entire narrative. Now, Thanksgiving in the United States, and Thanksgiving is a uniquely United States sort of tradition. It's not recognized, real, not known about or understood even in the rest of the world. So why anyone else from another country want to attack it's beyond me. But in Australia, for example, there's no such thing as Thanksgiving. So let's have a look here. Now, I did an internet search for Thanksgiving, and just to see what, and this is the biggest search platform, just to see what would come up. So is it going to be adverts about how to spice and season turkeys, or what vegetables to have with the meals? Is it going to be something like that? Is it going to be stories about families getting together? Is it any of that? No, absolutely not. So here we go. Here's the top one. The pilgrims advertised their evil intentions, and Thanksgiving is pure evil. The pilgrims, the white pilgrims, had abusive relationships with the Indians. The mythology that Thanksgiving nurtures, thanks is a lie. It's a twisted fable, and the mythology nurtures the evil white people, unspeakably evil. Let's go to the next one here. Is there any? Once more, this is pure evil. Is there any wonder that Thanksgiving is a day of mourning by everyone other than straight white males, and Native Americans are the victims here? Had this one here. Thanksgiving is a celebration of terrorism. It's white terrorism, the evil white people. It's terrorism, and it's blood money for the evil white people and the evil deeds that they committed. Thanksgiving. So here's another one here. I'm just going down the page here. The story that Thanksgiving is some sort of joyous celebration is merely white propaganda. The scum white people. The origins of Thanksgiving it's a whitewashed genocide by evil white people, and the ethnic erasure of beautiful people by the evil people. Oh, good. Wow. I had no idea white people were this evil, but everyone else is so pure. Then here's one. Here's one here saying, well, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Sure, the white people are unspeakably and horribly evil white people again, but the American Indians weren't actually pure. They also did bad things. The white people committed mass genocide with evil, but the Indians, they they did actually spit on the sidewalk. So let's just get some perspective and balance here. You know, we've got these incredibly evil white people, but tiny, weeny little bit evil local American Indians. So that's the nuance that they're getting here. Here's another story, probably more balanced here. It talks really about the first successful crop harvest. Plenty of evilness there, but they do mention that, you know, the purpose of Thanksgiving is because of this successful harvest. This is the next one here. The white people will never be able to overcome or erase their evilness. It's so much evilness. Goodness me. Let's go to the next page here because we're on a bit of a roll. Well, clearly, because the pilgrims prayed to God, that the Christian God, this proves that God is evil. God is evil as those white fucking devils, the fascist Nazis. Hitler was there. Hitler was there in 1621 in Thanksgiving. Hitler himself was going around. So were the pilgrims, this one pretends to be balanced, or were the pilgrims good or evil? Well, they were fucking evil. What's even the point of asking that question? Jesus. Setting people straight about Thanksgiving means that we have to accept the evil Europeans and evil white people and the evil they unleashed en masse on these poor, helpless, innocent Indians that never hurt a fly, ever. So, and it just goes on. I could go page after page. Now, this is part of the demoralization campaign. The lies that are being told about Thanksgiving are beyond hysterical, but no one's pushing back. So the lies are getting the traction, and kids are being taught this. Even in Australia, as much as Thanksgiving is even mentioned at all, and again, it's not celebrated here. The children, you mentioned just the word Thanksgiving, it gets an automatic reaction from high school kids. Oh, you mean the evil genocide of the North American Indians and by the evil white people, and they were mass murderers, and it's just an automatic response. So that's what they're being taught. Now, in America, New Zealand, Canada, and in Australia, where there were local Indigenous populations, not large, but they were here. Per square kilometre or square mile, there were probably more Polynesian Maoris in New Zealand than there were natives in Australia or even in North America, for that matter. The temperate climate in New Zealand sort of made that possible, and pretty much the whole island is fertile. So, or a substantial part of it, other than the mountain ranges. But so they're able to live off the land in New Zealand. The natural sort of game and wildlife, and also were again a lot of arable land there. So relative to the total mass of the islands there, but it's now commonplace all across those countries that every time there's a public event, it's opened up with, and I acknowledge this land, the original owners of the land were the such and such tribe, or the such and such people, or the so and so nation, or something like that. So, and then we show the respect, and we apologise for being white and for being evil and being oppressors and so on, and for them being victims. So it's a narrative that's, again, it's a globalist, centralist, scripted narrative, but it's all across those parts of the Western world now. But there's two things I want to talk about here. Who's writing those articles about how evil white people on Thanksgiving are? Because they very much tie being Christian into it. So the idea of Christianity and white people both getting a bash is the opportunity isn't missed. And we, as we know, the globalists in particular, the globalist cabal, crushing white people, or demoralizing white societies and crushing Christianity are two of their primary goals. So it's no accident that both these things are mentioned in these articles. Now, looking at the writers, I can't, the ones I looked at least, I couldn't find a single straight white male who was writing those articles. the majority of the articles are written by women, and the majority of those women are Jewish. The majority of those Jewish women are lesbian. Maybe it's an accident, but this is your classic activist hate white Western Christian society group. These are people who are co-opted, if not conscripted, and I don't think they would have to be arm twisted to do it. But they're activists anyway. Their job is to constantly attack, accuse, threaten, intimidate, demoralize white Western society. That's their job. These people are employed to do that. They are the attack dogs of the globalist cabal. Now, once you sort of get past the Jewish writers, who are heavily, I mean, whether you think there's an international Jewish conspiracy or not, that's quite beside the point. The hard absolute facts are that the majority of these writers were Jewish. No question of that. So now then you get to the next tier, and these are people who are like, you get some Native American people, or people who claim to have Native American ancestry. You wouldn't know it from looking at their profile photographs, but maybe they're an 8th or a 16th or something. But then you get the people from, say, India, few from China, but India would be the second tier of people who are writing about, and what they've got to do with it is beyond me, but are writing about how evil Christian white people are. These are, again, Hindu Indian activists who are clamoring to come to white countries, but the minute they get to the white country, do nothing but complain about racism and oppression and so on. So really, there's a few white women also doing the writing who are lesbians. Even a smaller number of gay white men who are writing, but I couldn't find. I'm sure there is one. I mean, there must be one somewhere. I couldn't find any of these articles. These articles that just pour pure hate onto white Christian civilization. They're allowed to do it without challenge. No one's. If they did that about black society or any other society, there'd be screaming international headlines. But they can do it about white society, white Christian society, without a single voice being raised in objection, or anyone pushing back or questioning it, or following the money as to who's paying these people to do this, and so on. So they're completely protected. A completely protected class as they sit there lobbing, nuclear warheads into white Western Christian society. So it's clearly an orchestrated, organised, funded, deliberately premeditated attack on white Christian society. So there's absolutely no question of that. And again, if I wouldn't mind so much if they. I wouldn't mind at all if they gave an absolutely balanced view, but it's not. Their determination is to tell as many lies as possible, to misrepresent as to the max, and again to demoralize Western society in this process. Pretty much all school children now in the West, America too, obviously, are subject to this. And imagine that, why should I bother to fight and stand up for this society? Because it's evil, it's bad, we're all evil, we're all Hitler, and did the most terrible things to all these wonderful, beautiful people who never themselves did anything bad in their lives. We are uniquely bad throughout human history, and white people, that is, white Christians, and so we should suffer. We should suffer penance for the evil, bad thing. This sort of thing. I don't think any civilization ever in the history of the world has allowed itself to be treated that way, with such misrepresented facts and with such, again, a sustained campaign of demoralization. I just want to just quickly comment on this thing about white people came and stole the land, stole the fucking Nazi fascist thieves. Let's just get some perspective on this. In Australia, the population, the local population, Indigenous population that we're here, bear in mind Australia has a very large sort of desert section of the landscape, but nonetheless, there were one person for every nine square kilometres. Let me just repeat that: one person for every 9 square kilometres of the country. So this meant that, and it meant this exactly, that white travellers could travel for days through various areas and not see a single person, single local person. On top of that, the locals were hunter-gatherer nomads, so they could move around to a series of places, over a series of years, and then come back to one sort of 5 years later that they'd been at 5 years previously, but because they were nomadic and moved around and lived just off the land, then they, again, white people could move into an area, not see a single native for years. Then the natives come back, say, oh, well, we were here 5 years ago, and by the way, we're nomads. So very different lifestyles of how white people were sort of building farms and running cattle and sheep and whatever, and building houses and having a completely different lifestyle. Now, the even where, and it often was, it was the white people didn't just take the land; they bought it. Now, because the local, whether it be North American Indians or Australian Aborigines or wherever, they had no concept of ownership, land ownership. They had no concept of sedentary living. They had no concept of contracts, of how you purchase something and then you own it and this sort of thing. So when the white people came, they would say, well, we want this area here, and as best as they could communicate, the white people would show what they had. It could be iron axes, or it could be things that the locals, technology, thousands of years ahead of what the local people would ever conceive of, so they would say, well, we'll take 100 axes, for example. We'll take 100 axes, and you can have this area here, and that would be. But to the local, again, when there's no understanding of contracts and ownership, the indigenous people would come back in a few years' time and say, no, we want this land back, and they would perceive the transaction was merely a temporary rental, whereas the white folks said, no, we bought this legitimately. This is ours now. And by the way, you're trespassing. So again, these were concepts that the indigenous people just didn't understand. The land is they've had this very socialist sort of concept. Well, the land's for everybody to come and go as they please. You can't own these sort of things, and because they never had sedentary places to live in, they were always moving because they were nomadic. They didn't have, and they lived off the land, so they didn't invest anything in the land. They didn't put up fences or irrigation ditches. They didn't do any of the things that someone who's going to hang around for a while does. So because they didn't invest that time in the land, they presumed and took the attitude the land belonged in terms of their tribe, and the tribes killed each other, by the way, and often so. But the land and what was on it, the kangaroos and whatever that they ate, those were owned by the tribe, and there was no private ownership in that sense. So you can see the difference in cultures and attitudes and just sophistication of social and human organization were vastly different. And you can see, of course, how there would have been disputes over the use of the land, access to it, and these sorts of things. Now, sometimes the local tribes, indigenous tribes, would stay in an area until they'd exhausted in the hunter-gatherer sense, exhausted the local resources, and they go, okay, let's move on to somewhere else where there's going to be more things to eat. But they would come back years later because the land had by then rejuvenated. The animals had moved back into the area and so on. But so that nomadic existence brought them in, of course, conflict with white people. Now, the other areas that we know about are things like white diseases that were brought to whether in contact with any area, exotic diseases from Asia being brought into Western Europe, could cause plenty of deaths. So this idea of people moving around from different areas that were otherwise reasonably well insulated, then they would bring with them diseases that the locals had no resistance to, and there would be many people would die from these diseases. That did occur, but that's not as a result of any malice or anything like that, far from it. So I don't see that any of these arrivals of the colonials were inherently evil or planned evil or anything like that at all. That's absurd. That's a revisionist history by people who are paid and orchestrated and arranged to demoralize Western society as thoroughly and as completely as can be arranged. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.